So in previous videos on my freighter upgrade saga, I suggested that you travel to these different merchant space stations and put them in your favorites. And I was on cloud nine yesterday when I had figured out, oh, you got to go to different space stations so that you could scarf up all the little augmentation and frigate modules and blah blah blah. And then I discovered that stuff started disappearing out of my favorites. I had a bunch of pirate locations in there, pirate space stations, and all of a sudden they were gone. I said, oh, well, maybe something happened in the game, so I exited the game and reloaded the game and said, oh, there, maybe, and no, they were still gone. So then I went to Google and did a Google search and made a discovery that was upsetting, to say the least. So my biggest thing right now is to say, don't put all that stuff in your favorites. Don't put all those locations in your favorites. Ignore my previous advice on putting all those merchant locations in your favorites, because, well, let me just pull it up and show you. There you go. Read it and weep. So it seems, it's not evidently not a concrete number. It's between 50 and 75 donations, and it depends on how frequently or when's the last time that you visited the location. So the ones that you haven't visited and that are quote unquote older, it's typical. It's a first in, first out kind of thing that is done often when this kind of thing happens. With computer programming, that's kind of the typical avenue that's taken. First in, first out. And that's what's going on here. So they limit the number that you can have. Evidently, it combines. One search I did suggested all of them. Everything in the terminus is limited, but to about 70 or so, whatever locations that they can have in there. But definitely your bases and your favorites, if you combine them up. I probably hit pretty close to that number when I started favoriting all the merchants and all the space stations, and that's when I noticed this, that all of a sudden stuff started disappearing out of my favorites. Thankfully, my bases, it didn't seem to mess with my bases, but it did. I had all but one, the most recent one that I had put in of my pirate locations, disappeared out of my favorites. And I don't know, I probably had about 10 of them in there. And then I discovered that the most recent favorites that I put in there for merchants, for vendors, guild vendors at the space stations, disappeared. They like I had just put them in and just been to them, just visited them, but they were the newest of the favorites that I had put in there. So that first in, first out thing didn't work in that case. It actually took the last in, and because I had previous locations in my favorites, but I guess I had frequented them several times, so they didn't disappear. But so, yeah, I about 8 or 9 of the ones that I put in there about 8 or 9 of the ones that I put in there for the guild merchants didn't even stay in favorites. So I spent several hours last night, cleaning up my favorites and getting the portal addresses for those systems that I wanted to keep track of. But I just don't see me. If I pick up some valuable items, I would just jump on my terminus and from my fleet missions when I send them out from the freighter, and I send them all out every day. I do all those fleet missions, and what's it? Let you have 6 a day or something like that. And I got a living ship now, so I also send out an organic with every one of my missions, so that I can get back some of those psychonic eggs, etc., so I can upgrade the living ships. Those living ships are way cool. I like those. But anyway, let's put a kink in the works. I had to kind of change, because I would just jump. Oh, look, I got an item there. It's worth. If I sell it here on the ship, I guess the freighters, it's going to pick up whatever system I happen to be in at the time. Because my freighter is, I got my freighter on a mission to move towards the center of the galaxy, and I was doing it with just the freighter, but then I got a living ship, and so I've been just using the living ship. It's awesome when it comes to traveling through those black holes and making those bigger jumps, and then I could just summon the freighter instead of using the slow freighter that's only going to jump such small steps at a time. Anyway, I guess I'm gonna have to start saving up the stuff I get from the fleet missions, and when I get a bunch of them, then it'll make it worth my while to use a portal jump to go sell stuff, because I'm certainly not going to use portal jumps to go sell one item here and there, and I might have one scientific one and one high tech one and one. That kind of throws all that out of what I've been doing, and it just upsets the whole apple cart. That's all. Well, the solution to all this is I'm trying to be nice. Anyway, portals. So if you have all 16 glyphs, you can travel by portal. But you can't travel by portal to a base station. You can only travel by portal to a planet. And evidently, every planet has a portal. This is a portal. In order to use a portal, I'm sure most of you have already done it and you know all about it. But for the people who haven't or don't know, this is, you can use a portal to travel to any planet. You cannot use a portal to travel to a space station. The way you get the address to what I've seen, I'm sure there's more than one way, but if you go into your quick menu and you go over to the photo mode, and you'll notice in the lower left down there, it gives you those icons. There's 12 of them there. They're called glyphs. And there's 16 glyphs in the game, and you have to discover them. I believe you do it through when you do the Atlas quest. I did mine a little differently. There's all kinds of videos on YouTube on how you get all the 16 glyphs. But I'm not going to delve into all that right now. But you got to have 12 of them. The designated 12 gives you an address, and that address takes you to a planet. You cannot use a glyph address to go to a specific base. You can go to a planet. You cannot use a glyph address to go to a space station. So regarding my, traveling to all these different merchants and mercenaries and different guild vendors at space stations, the best you can do, since we're limited on how many we can save in the terminus travel, the best you can do is travel to a planet. Supposedly they have trillions of planets in this game. Trillions with a T. And 255 galaxies that you could travel to. And, but you can only favorite or have bases at 70 locations in combination of the two. I mean, again, that's dropped the ball on that one. So anyway, yeah. So now we know you can, like this planet here that I'm on an AF5. It's in Ordo, and I can go into photo mode. I can get the glyph address, but of course I can't travel here from here. But you could do this on any planet. You can even do it on the space station, but like I said, it's going to give you a random whatever location it wants to give you, and you don't know where that's going to be until you try to go there. So I just am very disappointed. Very, very, very. I think this is cool. I love this. I love the glyph travel, but I can't glyph travel to my base station. I can, if I had 400 base stations and I can only keep 70 of them, never mind I couldn't have any favorites, because you can only have about 70 as I showed you previously in the Google search. It's a serious oversight in the game that has really changed my opinion of it. But I'll continue to play it, but not with the enthusiasm that I had previously, because it's been a serious letdown. That you can't travel to all the bases you create, and you can't travel to all the space stations that you want to do trade with, directly. I mean, you could travel there. Yeah, you could travel anywhere in your spaceship, of course. Yeah, the galaxy travel, how long it takes. Even if I had, supposedly the most you can have is like 6,000 light years or something on your. If you had all your duckies in a row, you could maybe have 6,000 light years that you could jump. And when we start the game, we're 700 and something thousand light years away from the center of the galaxy. So, if we're going from one location to another and we got stuff, it takes a long time if you're gonna try traveling, and it's just not. It's not nice. It's not nice. It puts a huge kink in the works that we can't. If I want to have 400 bases, the game allows me to make 400 bases. I ought to be able to directly travel to those 400 bases themselves. But I having to use a portal that's going to throw me to some random location on that planet, and then I had to use my ship to travel to my base station. Why have the terminus if it's only useful for 70 locations? That seems rather crazy. They have all your discoveries in here, every place you visited. And they even know, hey, look, he has a base on that one. 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 Why can't I just travel from the discoveries menu? Why we gotta have a terminus? You know, or put them both in there. You know, you can have your 70 favorites in the terminus, but use this also for travel. It's actually be able to click here and travel to this planet that I've already discovered. I've already set foot down on this planet. You know, I mean, you got a whole list of every system I've ever visited here. Every system I've ever been to. I had to be able to click on that system. If it has a space station in it, I ought to be able to travel to that space station. You know, it seems like I got half the job done here, just in the discoveries area. It just seems so limiting that they've done this, and I'm very disappointed in No Man's Sky with what's happening with this. And I'll leave it at that. So let's talk about the portal travel a little bit. So we know how to get those glyph addresses, and you know you can find the portals. But you know, I actually built a base. This is the first portal I found. I went through using my rover and going to a monolith and responding to the question and answer deal at the monolith, and then it sent me to this portal. So, listening to the wise words of one of my No Man's Sky YouTube guys that I follow, I built a base near the portal so that I can always come to this portal. So of course we're in the Euclid system. As a side note, if you're in a different galaxy, portals can only be used to travel to other planets within the same galaxy. You can't go to another galaxy using a portal. But how do you? I'm not going to get into how I do it, but just generally, these glyphs that we spoke about here. They all have a name. So let me pull up the little screen. Hold on. So you can see they all have a name. Every glyph they have a name, and you look at different. You look at different. When I first looked this up, I brought up a couple of them that they seem to disagree with what the names are. But that one that I just showed you there, that one seems to be. Seems to be mostly agree with what all the rest of the people. So once you get this glyph addresses, you can use those names of them and keep track of them that way, or you could take a screenshot and keep track of them that way. But somehow, somewhere or another, you're going to have to manually keep track of each one of these glyph addresses, and so that you can use the portal to go to them.